Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Jeremy Schumacher. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I'm the Jer in Wellness with Jer. Thanks for stopping by and checking out my channel. Today, we are back with another comic book review, which I'm pretty excited about. We're going to talk about World Tree, which is stylized W. I'll put up the cover. You'll see it. There's a bunch of world trees. My logo, the Wellness with Jer logo, is based off Yggdrasil, a world tree. So if you just Google, I've said this before, Google results have gotten really shitty lately because giant corporations selling out gives us worse products. If you Google World Tree, there's like a role-playing game, there's a novel. So like it's a complicated thing. But this is the James Tynion IV horror series, comic series. I have the collected edition. I'm a trade paperback reader. Going to the comic shop regularly is hard for me to maintain. So I like to pick up the collected editions. So volume 1 is what I read, issues 1 through 6. World Tree is basically kind of the premise of like, what if the internet had a virus that made us sick and it led to the end of the world? And so it's horror from James Tynion, who's a Milwaukee native. So I'm super biased from the get-go. He went to Marquette High School, just down the road. He's like a year or two older than me, I think. So like grew up in Milwaukee around the same time. So like I have a lot of a bunch of his works are set in Milwaukee or Wisconsin. Nice House on the Lake. Something is Killing the Children starts in Wisconsin. So like a bunch of stuff in the area. The Woods, his series also is in Wisconsin. So he's written a bunch of stuff that I'm like, I'm a homer for Wisconsin. Dogs chewing things over here. I'm a homer for Wisconsin and his work. I think the first thing of his that I read was probably Batman. But the first thing that wasn't a superhero story was Department of Truth, which is really good, and I recommend. I've read Nice House on the Lake, which I believe won an Eisner last year. So World Tree is the thing that's ongoing, or the most recent thing, and yeah, I think it does some interesting things and brings up some interesting things. Again, I kind of bring up where he's from and when, because the book is really a horror series that starts around the like when the internet became a cultural thing. So like chat boards and there's just some like early 2000s stuff to it. So I think for me, like a millennial, it is really appealing. And like there's just so basically this group of friends, which is kind of seems to be Tynion's thing now, is like an ensemble cast, which is fine. Gives a lot of interactions to dig into. I'll probably come back and do a review of Nice House on the Lake at some point. Uh, so there's an ensemble cast, but basically they were messing around on the internet before people really knew what the internet was. They found this thing called the Undernet, and it really messed them up. And we don't know a ton about what's going on here other than people who are exposed to the Undernet start killing people. So we have kind of like an antagonist, a villain, James Tynion's own words, a sexy murder lady. She's walking around in various states of undress, covered in blood, murdering people. And that's kind of the hook. So we get a character who finds their way to the Undernet somehow, because our main characters have locked it safely away, and now it's back out. And they basically go from house to house. They show people their phone, which has the Undernet on it. The people like glitch out, and then he stabs them. And it's a like 60-person murder spree. And this is kind of how we're introduced to the story of like, oh shit, this internet virus is out, and here's this murder spree. So we get the connection to the family because the older brother kind of gets roped into it, and then we have this group that found the Undernet in 1999 and shut it down, and now it's come back out, and then there's some fast forwarding in the series as well. So a bit of like a time travel type, not time travel, but like telling the story in a couple different parts. And the glitch, like I did a review of Mr. Miracle, which I loved. I love the artwork in that show, or in that comic, and like kind of the same glitchiness. So I like this story a lot. The one of the fears I think with like, it's depressing to talk about the internet. I think that's the point. James Tynion has a bunch of stuff where he talks about why horror is on the rise and why, as a culture, we're more interested in horror stories now because the times we're living in are scary and unsafe. And he's an openly gay comic book writer, and so we look at the LGBTQ community. We look at people of color, like hate crimes are on the rise. LGBTQ rights are being taken away. So there's definitely like things to be concerned about. I think global warming has us all anxious about the future. And so when we're faced with these kind of cultural anxieties, horror is a really good way to explore these things and to have a bit of like an experience in a safe way and process some of these emotions. So I think the fear of the internet, and like there's some fear is always stylized in the book as PH34R, like a stylized version of fear. And like if you grew up on AOL Instant Messenger, like I did, like we were all weird and cringy. Our Hotmail email address accounts are cringy. We thought it was cool because we were 13 or 14 years old, and it's not. It has aged poorly. But like I think that's the thing, because he grew up in that age. He's not trying to be cool right now with this stuff. He's trying to capture a feeling or a sense of what it was like to be on the internet back then. And we all had our, MySpace was a thing originally, the first social media, but we had AOL Instant Messenger. We all had our little profiles that we had our backgrounds, and we changed the font, and we had our song lyrics that we quoted. And like, it was all very juvenile and cringy. So like reading it, like really, I think captures that early internet. And then I think it captures like stuff like 4chan, and there's some message boards that are referenced in the show that I had forgotten existed. And like, right, the early internet, even the internet now, is kind of a wild place. Like, it wouldn't take a ton of clicking around to end up on like a shock gore website that was showing beheadings or pictures from murder scenes, or worse things than that. And the kind of that internet rabbit hole, like before there were a ton of safeguards, like there wasn't safe browser settings back in the day. And again, when you got on some of these message boards and stuff, like people told you to stay away from them because your computer would get a virus. But like, honestly, it was probably more content driven than anything, of like people were just trying to put up shock stuff. Cringy edgelord bullshit has existed from the beginning of the internet. And so you have people who grew up on that, you have people who remember some of that stuff. And the story talks a little bit about like, oh, I was this old and I came across this video of like someone being beheaded, and like I've never been able to forget it. Like that stuff happens. And in the internet, it's a weird juxtaposition of like you can see something that is very real. I'll try and think of something that's not too traumatic. On Reddit, there's a subreddit called Nature is Metal, which is basically animals eating each other. But basically saying that like the natural world is kind of, throw the horns up, metal and brutal, and like, right, in order to survive you have to destroy something, whether it's plants or animals. The trade-off is killing something. And so I think some of that stuff is real, and like is more real than the screen makes it feel. And so this kind of disconnect, and so our main antagonist, who shows up as fear embodied, also is like, yes, sexy murder lady, but also like detached from humanity. And it reminds me of Watchmen, in the graphic novel by Alan Moore. Dr. Manhattan starts wearing a superhero costume, and as he detaches from his own humanity more and more, he stops following social norms, which is so like throughout Watchmen, Dr. Manhattan gets more and more naked. And so it's interesting to see how like this character Fear is one of those things where the less they're following social norms, the less human they are, even though to be naked is a very human experience. Like that's how you're brought into the world. And so there's nothing unhuman about it. And yet her breaking of social norms, refusing to follow social norms, is inhuman. And so you have this digital inhuman barrier to what it's like to be human. And then you have this figure who's kind of highlighting that humanity is a social construct and like social norms are weird and don't need to be followed, but also like we live in a society, so we can't just go around stabbing people. That's bad for society. So I think it's a little bit more, if I haven't done a review of his other stuff, but I think it's a little bit more straight horror. The internet is a scary place, and so I think it captures that pretty well. But I also think just like the gore factor is much higher than like maybe not something is killing the children, but something is killing the children is also really good. Department of Truth. I just read an interview before I was prepping this, like, and the author Tynion talks about the different types of horror, and like dread is like the sense of building suspense, and then there's also like shock gore and like just like bloody stuff. And so I think in his different writings he's exploring these different versions of the horror genre, and so this seems a little bit more, there's some dread but also just some of that like gore and visceral type responses to stuff. So I read it again as the collected edition, volumes 1 through 6, which is how I like to consume this media, versus like I read Nice House on the Lake on my phone, and I don't like to read comics on my phone. I was playing around with one of the new library apps. Support your local library and your local comic shop. It's hard for me to be like support the library and also support comic shops. Read books, read things authors put out that's supporting them, even if it's from your library. But yeah, so like Hoopla is a library app, at least in where I am. And there's Libby, which is also a library app. But so you can basically borrow books like you would get them from the library with a library card, and you get them for a certain amount of time digitally. And so like I read Nice House on the Lake, the deluxe edition, which is volumes 1 through 12 on my phone. And it's nice how you can like click and zoom in and like read some of the artwork, but there's something different, I think, with having the book in front of you and just being able to kind of look at the artwork yourself. So for like horror, I found the phone to not, the screen, as World Tree is kind of getting at, the screen kind of creates a disconnect. So I didn't find a Nice House at the Lake to be, maybe it's dread. There's a lot that I could talk about with Nice House and Lake. This is a World Tree review though. So I liked it. I thought the artwork was good. I think people are going to focus on like naked lady walking around murdering people, but it does capture a certain time and place, I guess, of like trying to go back to 1999 and what the internet was like then. Like technology, like we forget because we're walking around with supercomputers in our phone or in our pockets that like OG computers were really terrible and slow and like dirty and dusty. Like technology is like this kind of cyberpunk genre is like not how tech started. It was dirty and dusty, and you had this terrible fan, and there was noises and clicks, and like it wasn't slick and cool and cyberpunk. So yeah, I think the comic captures that feeling pretty well, and that fear of the internet. Like we know misinformation is a real problem in the internet. Like if you're in the United States and you're ever around politics, like right-wing Republicans live in a different world than the rest of us because they only get their media from propaganda outlets. And like that's true everywhere, right? Like China's been spending a lot of time and resources in that. Russia's been doing that for years, both in Russia and in other countries. So like controlling the media machine and the propaganda. Media is, this has been true since the 90s. There's only really like 5 major media corporations. One of them is right-leaning. And so, they're all right-leaning if you're on a like actual progressive scale. But like, Fox News and the Murdoch family, like really being the people who are pushing the right-wing narratives, like it's easy for misinformation to get out and for things to get muddied, like the conspiracy theory stuff. And so I think World Tree deals with like bad information travels on the internet faster than we can keep up with it. And how do you deal with that? And it's a horror story, so like turn off the internet is the answer, but like that's not a realistic response because it's fiction, which is fine. I think also like these are stories, these are ideas that Tynion has played with in like Department of Truth, which is like about conspiracy theories getting out and satanic panic, which like again is fun because I grew up in Wisconsin, just down the road from where he would have been, and so like remembering the satanic panic. I don't know if he grew up religious or not. He went to Marquette High School, which is technically Catholic. So, and again, I only know that because I'm from Milwaukee. It's not like I've extensively done a ton of prep for this video outside of my norm. Woohoo, Milwaukee. So, but like, yeah, the religious trauma, the satanic panic from very young. Like, I grew up conservative fundamentalist. So, like, Harry Potter was a panic, Pokemon was a panic. Christians have been panicking about everything for years. It's exhausting, but you have to live from a place of fear to motivate people. Eternal reward, very much the stick motivation, the carrot or the stick, getting a lot of the stick with the earthly stuff, because religion is about social control. So, a lot of those moral panics, transgender people in bathrooms is like a contrived moral panic. Honestly, even the border wall is a moral panic, and I'm not like a expert on immigration, but like there's so much misinformation, and there's so much performative politics of like, we're going to put barbed wire on the border. Like, the border's thousands of miles long, so whatever you're seeing on the news report, walk one more mile out, and the border is thousands of miles long. So whatever you're seeing on a news report about Greg Abbott put this thing of barbed wire up, like, that's not where people are crossing. Like, that's not how any of this works. But if you're from Iowa or from Wisconsin or Illinois, you don't know things about the border, and so you can watch your Fox News or your OAN or listen to the Daily Wire or whatever right-wing outlet you're getting from Joe Rogan, who's an idiot. Jordan Peterson, also an idiot. I have a video series complaining about Jordan Peterson. So if you watch some of this stuff, it's all performative because, again, you can just pan the camera left or right and see that there's plenty of border that's not protected. I think Trump's border wall covered like 3% of the border. So again, like performative politics, all this stuff is fear mongering, and that's really what World Tree is kind of getting at, is like how the internet is used to create fear and drive engagement through fear and get those angry clicks, and the internet had the potential to be kind of an ultimate form of democracy. That potential has gone away. We don't have that anymore. That option has gone. But again, this idea that like initially it was about finding community and connection, and even with social media, like that was community and connection, and how do you keep in touch with people when they're across the country and you go to college, but then you have to graduate and go your separate ways. How do you stay in touch with these people? And so like there's aspects of the internet that have always been good and helpful. I talked about like the fear mongering around LGBTQ community. Like I don't know what that community would look like without the internet and being able to connect. I know for Gen Z and Gen Alpha folks, kids coming up, like growing up with that, that's where their community is. And that's so powerful and helpful for them. And as always, there's a bunch of bullshit on the internet. And it's getting worse because corporations are selling out and cutting back safeguards. And we have senators who are 70 or 80 years old and don't know how the internet works, and so are letting corporations get away with cutting safeguards. And it's scary in one way. And the internet's always been just that double-edged sword. There's good stuff to it and there's bad stuff to it. So World Tree really leans into all of these topics, and it's a fascinating dive. It's a fun little like horror romp. So, 2 thumbs up. I support it, not just because I'm biased for a Milwaukee creator, but I'm Milwaukee born, a Milwaukee native, but because like it's a good series. And I think there's value to engaging with some horror stories and some scary genres to give that creeping dread. It's a Pink Floyd song, the creeping malaise. That's not the name of the song, it's a lyric from the song. And so I think giving space to those feelings of fear and anxiety and dread is helpful, intentionally, so that you don't turn it into despair and we don't go too far down that rabbit hole, that there's joy and there's love and there's connection. And that's the story is going to, as it unfolds, would be my guess, is that connection between the people who are trying to save the world. Again, it's the connections, it's the people, it's the relationships that matter. So Yeah, volume 6. I mean, like I think volume 9 is out in stores as I'm recording right now. It's New Comic Wednesday. Um, but yeah, the collected edition is all I'm at. But I give it a thumbs up. Check it out. Read it. Tynion stuff is good. Some of the horror stuff, different versions of horror, but definitely worth checking out. So check out World Tree by James Tynion. And he's also, just as a nerd out minute here, not just the Milwaukee connection, but he's on Substack. I think he's one of the first creators who kind of got like a big Substack contract and deal. He had been at DC. He wrote Batman for a couple of years and created a bunch of characters. Punchline is one of his, and so he's done the big superhero stuff, and he's moved into more creator-controlled comics, which is an interesting thing to see, kind of how creators and authors are trying to make sure that their livelihood is taken care of in this capitalistic dystopia where something like Marvel can get bought out by DC. And what does that mean for the people who have written comics for years when they're just going to pluck their character and put them in a show or whatever? So it's an interesting time in creator-owned stuff for comics. And so also interesting in that. And like, that's cool that we have writers who are Eisner Award winners, which is the big, that's the Oscar, the Grammy of the comics industry, the Eisner Award for Best Writer. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see where some of this stuff goes as the comics industry shakes out. I don't think DC or Marvel or Image, honestly, Boom, Dark Horse, like I don't think those things are going anywhere, although Boom and Dark Horse are certainly much smaller. But like DC is pretty entrenched. That's Batman, that's the Justice League, that's Wonder Woman. Like they're doing fine, even if their movies did poorly and are needing to be rebooted. And Sony owns Spider-Man, but Marvel owns Spider-Man. Like, so comics is an interesting world in like kind of the trademark and contract law stuff. And so it's interesting to see a big author, a big writer who's at the top of his game, kind of peaking in their career, to walk away from all that and say, no, I'm going to focus on stuff that I own, that I control, and then seeing like the publishers come and want to publish that stuff after he's written it. So also cool that he's creating that way and pushing the industry forward. So yeah, World Tree, check it out. I'll probably do some more reviews because again, I tend to consume media by reading a lot of stuff from one person. So Something is Killing the Children is great. Nice House on the Lake is great. Nice House on the Lake is good. I didn't think it was great, but like, again, sometimes I do a disservice by binging authors because like some of the stuff starts to run together. Department of Truth I read a long time ago, and that's very good. But also I'm super biased because that one's set in Milwaukee. So this stuff is good. Tynion plays with a lot of fun psychological concepts of what does belief do to us? What is fear really about? Is it matter if it's real or not, or if it's in our head, if our response is still anxious? So the fear related to the internet. World Tree, check it out. 2 thumbs up. All right, I've rambled enough. Thanks for stopping by and checking out my channel. Like, subscribe, do all those YouTube-y things. We've got merch now. You can find me at wellnesswithjared.com for stuff with my practice, my blog, other media appearances I have, or I'm at Wellness with Jared on Instagram, as well as here on the YouTube channel. All right, everybody, thanks for stopping by. Take care. Peace.